Hello, I'm Ken Pierce, and I wanted to spend a few moments with you talking about conflict. And I'm actually going to be showing you simply 7 slides on conflict. And to get you kind of thinking about conflict, because I know you're an expert on it, I want you to think about a couple things. First thing is, what do you perceive today to be your greatest conflict in your life? As you notice what that is, look back over your past and ask yourself, what was your greatest conflict in your life up to the present? And then as you look towards the future, ask yourself, what do you anticipate will be your greatest conflict in the future? Now, this is to get you inside the whole idea of conflict. Now I want to start by demonstrating or showing you a fundamental principle of nature. And if you recall, nature is our universe. Nature is everything around us. And we are part of nature. We are as much a part of it as a tree or a bush or anything else. Now, all the sciences in our societies, every ology, every research endeavor, is actually studying some aspect of nature, some piece of it that we want to understand, so we can use that to enhance our survival in some way. That's what it's about. And one of the fundamental laws of nature, one of the fundamental laws of science, is the law of symmetry. The law of symmetry is also called the law of balance. It's also called equilibrium. It's got a lot of different names. In biology, it's called homeostasis. So it's a fundamental law that prevails throughout our life, throughout our existence at all levels. Now, here's an example of it. This is a pendulum, as you probably have seen these, and it has a swing to it. And there are mathematical principles involved in that swing. How far it goes, how fast it goes, all that kind of stuff. But what it demonstrates is that there is a duality to our universe. That at every level of our universe, there is an innate duality. If you look at, for example, let's go very small. Let's go to atoms. Everything is made up of atoms. And atoms have particles inside atoms. Well, they've established some time ago now that every atom is a balance, a symmetry of positrons and electrons. So there's positrons and electrons keeping each atom balanced. And particle physicists tell us that if an atom of anything was to be off balance, if that was possible, through the domino principle, our universe would disintegrate. So that the stability of that symmetry is very strong in our universe, in everything around us. Now, of course, if you chunk up higher, let's say to your significant other. If you have been in a fairly stable relationship for a number of years, that means that the law of symmetry dictates that one of you will be primarily an optimist and one of you primarily a pessimist. That duality keeps your relationship stable. That's what it's for. And even though you may at times change to the opposite, your partner will change to their opposite to keep the relationship stable. Now let's take it a step higher. Let's take it to parents and children. Every child perceives one parent to be primarily their supporter and the other parent to be primarily their challenger. And that's nature's way to ensure the maximum evolution, the maximum learning for that child. I once had a set of twins in my office, and I was explaining this principle to them, and I said, so I asked the first twin, I said, who is your challenger? And he said, Mom. I said, the other twin, who is your challenger? And he said, Dad. So it's not about the actual parents, it's about the children's perception of them. Well, that principle applies in everything, and it applies in every experience we have in life. In other words, every experience we've had in life actually has a plus and a minus to it. And we are encouraged by our culture not to believe that, to deny that. But the truth, of course, is that it's there. Now, conflict is all about that. Conflict is the primary tool that we use to learn that principle. Conflict is the primary tool we use to learn about the duality of our universe, of our life. The duality of everything, in fact. In a sense, conflict is a demonstration of this duality. So we know, for example, that if you push the pendulum over here, it has to come back. Everybody knows that. We've tried it enough in so many different venues in our life. We know it's true. It's not going to stay in one side or the other, which means that everything in life has a plus and a minus, up, down, in, out, left, right, black, white, good, bad. That there's this duality everywhere. And that nature seeks a symmetry. So let's take my glass of water here. Whichever way I twist the glass or turn the glass, the water always seeks a perfectly symmetrical balance. That's nature's way. That's nature's law. And it applies not just in water and in pendulums, it applies in our life, in our relationships, in every aspect of our existence. So this being the case, that means that what I hope you remember is that our evolution requires conflict. That's the first point I want you to remember, that our evolution demands that we be in conflict. Now, why conflict? Why that version? Why that tool? Why can't we go to here and stay there? It always goes back. Well, that's because nature wastes nothing. In fact, in nature there is no waste. It's been said that there's no such thing as a weed. It's just a plant that's in the wrong place according to some person. Now, I've heard recently that they're redefining the concept of waste in terms of industry. They're saying this isn't really a waste, it's a byproduct that we haven't found a use for yet. And that's the truth. So, nature is efficient, and what it does, nature uses this duality to maximize the evolution of our universe, maximize the evolution of our species, maximize the evolution of everything around us. So what conflict does is it ensures that we use the minimum amount of resources to achieve the maximum amount of learning or evolution. So conflict is where evolution occurs. So in fact, conflict is where your evolution occurs. Conflict is where my evolution occurs. I'll give you an example. When I was very young, I had asthma as a child, all through my childhood. And so what I did was I developed the belief that I could not exert myself because I might get an asthma attack and suffocate and die. And that belief prevailed in my life for many, many years. And then as I grew and gained more and more experiences in life about the duality of life, I challenged it and said, well, what if I exerted myself? What would happen? I started playing with that. I studied judo and karate, and I started jogging and all that stuff. In that journey, I learned that it was my belief, it wasn't the truth. I learned to the point where I was able to run a marathon as an asthmatic. Now, many people do this, not just me. Many people do this. But it's because they've used this duality of nature to grow them, to enhance them, to help them understand the perfection of who they are. That's what this is about. I don't know, you probably don't remember, but I bet your parents remember if you asked them. If you asked your mom and dad, if when you were 1 and 2 and almost into 3, if they recall you being very self-confident, having high self-worth, having huge self-esteem, that you believed when you were born, like every child, that you could be anything and do anything and have anything. Well, every child is born believing that. That's nature's, in a sense, given that you have used and I have used to evolve ourselves. As a young child, as we negotiate with the giants in our life to ensure our survival, we pick up our perceptions of them based on their value systems. We then use that perception, those perceptions, to uncover our innate perfection, our innate symmetry. And the journey of our life is to actually uncover the fact that we are actually quite okay. and that we are destined to learn to love ourselves again like we did when we were born. That's our journey. That there's an innate perfection to us. So conflict with yourself grows you. Conflict with others grows you as well. And when you have conflict with others, it's actually a conflict with yourself. Because what's going on in a sense, at almost an unconscious level, is you're mad at yourself in a sense because you don't understand why you can't convince that person to cooperate with you, why you can't convince that person to like you, why you can't convince, that kind of thing. That's what's going on. So that's the third point. Conflicts are in two forms. They're internal and external, but ultimately they both serve the same purpose, which is for you to grow in self-worth and self-esteem. The next point I want to make is that it's really important to expect conflict constantly in your life. The only people that are not in conflict in some form are people who are heavily medicated or who are not being truthful. They're denying it. Because to have conflict means to say I'm growing. To have conflict is to say I am learning, I am evolving, I am gaining self-esteem in more and more areas of my life. So since evolution is constant, so is conflict. And without conflict, there will be no personal evolution. So conflict actually has ensured that you survived to who you are today. Let's take an example. Remember I asked you at the beginning of this to think of your greatest challenge in the past. I want you to go back to that perception you have of your greatest challenge. And I'll use my example. My greatest challenge in my past, I think, was my health, was to stay healthy. And in that endeavor, because I perceived that great challenge, and it has been and is a constant challenge in my life, it has been the catalyst for me to make my health a high priority in my value system, which enables me to be in a fairly good state of health given my chronological age, because I work at it. It's a high value. So without having had all that illness as a young child, I might take my health for granted. I might abuse my body with excesses of something and wouldn't be as healthy as I am today. Now think of your experience, your greatest challenge in the past. Think of what it is and ask yourself this question. What did you learn from that experience that, looking back, changed your life forever? That somehow, as you perceive it inside your value system, it has contributed significantly to who you are, what you do, and what you have today. Notice what it is. I'll bet you my pension plan that it's very, very important to who you are today. That's the result of a conflict you had. That's the result of how you evolved to be who you are today because of that so-called bad experience, so-called bad challenge. But in nature, there's no bad without good. That's what I want you to remember from this. The next point is, it's really important to understand each conflict. Each conflict actually uncovers in our awareness, our personal awareness, a new duality that we haven't noticed before. I'll give you an example. I have 3 children, and my oldest daughter, Michelle, is now 36, and 6 years ago, she developed a form of cancer which is currently incurable. And at the time, of course, it shook not just her, of course, but our whole family. And I had to go find the duality of my perception of my daughter having cancer. Now, I had the illusion, the one-sided illusion from my personal life experiences, that people don't attend their children's funeral. It was a fantasy I had, something I used to beat myself up, something I used to perpetuate my illusions, which means I didn't watch the 6 o'clock news very often, because In most days, in most newscasts, there'll be somebody who has lost a child. It's very common. I was kind of ignoring that. When my daughter developed this cancer, this disease, I had to use some of the tools I learned in my work to prove to myself that if my child died, if any of my children died, or any of my grandchildren died, it would be a 50-50 event. And I had to prove that to myself inside my value system. I had to do a lot of work on that, and I did it. Because I did, I took that conflict and found the other side. I'm no longer afraid of my child dying. She hasn't, she's in remission now, but it could happen. But I'm not afraid of it happening. And as I look at each member of my family, each one of us have made a personal transition to being okay with one of our loved ones having cancer. Everyone's got to do their own work. I have the privilege to be able to use some of the tools in my work for my personal life. And that gives me, in a sense, I think, an advantage. I share this with my family, but they are where they need to be. That's how it's supposed to be. Everyone learns their own way, as you will. So, what I'm saying to you is, in essence, is that each conflict you have raises your awareness of a duality that you didn't think it was a duality. I thought cancer was bad. No. That was my illusion. Cancer is good and bad. It's one of nature's tools that it uses to ensure that the population of the planet is a balanced, symmetrical event. Jacques Cousteau said, it's only because we die that we value life. So while cancer is a very scary thing, it also is a very useful thing and enables our planet to keep growing and evolving and stay balanced so that we all eventually will die of something. Well, cancer is one of those mechanisms that nature uses to recycle people. That's what it's for. And if you talk to someone, as I have in my work, someone who has cancer, who has developed cancer, they will, as they journey through that challenge, they will find the other side, how it served them, how it made them more than they were before, more aware, more appreciative, more valued. They appreciate, in a sense, all areas of life because of the experience of cancer. That's nature's law. So everything has two sides. Nature also uses conflict to remind us that we are part of nature. We are not outside it, we are not above it, we are part of it. Therefore, we follow its same laws. Let me offer you an example. Let's take the concept of beauty. Our society has very definitive concepts of beauty. And invariably, beauty is defined as some form of symmetry. So, for example, if you think of maybe some supermodel that you think is very attractive, male or female, doesn't matter. My guess will be that they will have a physical symmetry to their body. In other words, both eyebrows will be level, there won't be one up here. Both ears will be level, there won't be one up here. They won't limp, they won't have one arm short of the other. They'll have a physical symmetry. Well, that symmetry is what we call beauty. It comes in many forms. Even if you listen to music, music always has a balance to it, highs and lows. If you look at our economy, it has an ups and downs. You look at our weather, it has ups and downs. There's symmetry everywhere. So as we meet a challenge, a personal conflict, it reminds us we're part of that same system. So that's the fifth point I'd like you to remember, is to understand each conflict, because it reminds you that you're part of nature. And that's very, very important to know. Now, the next piece is about, as you notice your challenges, as you notice your conflicts, notice how it creates new choices. It creates new opportunities for you. That's what it's for. It challenges you. It's like you're at a level of consciousness where you see good and bad. And then you get some challenge, oh, that's bad. And as you find the other side, you go, oh, it's both. Or maybe neither. Then you have a new challenge, oh, that's bad. And then you find the other side. And you go, oh, maybe it's both. Maybe it's neither. And you go, oh, that's good. And you go, oh, no, look, it's bad too. Oh, maybe there's something going on here. Maybe there's a, and as you raise your level of awareness, it gives you new choices. It gives you new decisions. And it gives you new wisdom. If you have the privilege of being around senior citizens, you may have noticed that the ones who have their, have their mental faculties and have some degree of health, they have usually a high level of appreciation for their life. They have a high level of awareness, not just of themselves and their, their own life, but of the people around them, their family, their friends, their community. Well, this actually evolves from their exploration of the law of symmetry. And if you spend the time to talk with them, they can tell you stories that will demonstrate that to you. And I'll tell you one that comes to my mind that had happened to me about 4 years ago. I was in Houston, Texas, traveling to Toronto, waiting for an airline flight. And there was two of us in the waiting area. We were quite early, and it was an elderly lady about 78 years of age. And her name was Lily. And Lily was traveling from Houston to Toronto, where she lived. And I was kind of just going through Toronto. Anyway, and we got talking, and she had said that she was, in fact, a war bride to Canada in 1945. And I said to her, Lily, I said, that's 2 years before I was born. You've been around a long time. She said, yeah, I have. And she told me she was a war bride from Scotland to Canada in 1945. And she would now live in Toronto in a seniors complex. And she had 2 children, and one of her sons lived in Toronto as well. And while he was married, he had no children of his own, so she was not a grandmother yet. And so she could talk about herself, and she asked me what I did, and I told her what I did. And so I said to her, I'd like to ask you a question. I said, I speak a lot about the law of symmetry, and there's a balance to everyone's life. I'd like to ask you, how would you summarize all of your life so far, all 78 years? And she said, well, that's an interesting question, Ken. No one's ever asked me that before. I said, well, just want to get a sense of how you assess the whole experience. She said, well, I went through a world war, and she said, I had 2 children. One died at 10 through leukemia, and I'm a widow. And I had 5 siblings, but I have 1 surviving sister who lives in Houston. That's why I'm down here visiting her. And I spent 3 months here living with her, just to keep the contact. And she said, I've had my life. I said, yes. I said, but how would you summarize your whole life? And she said, well, I've had the bad times, but I've had a whole bunch of good times too, And my life is perfect for me. I wouldn't change a moment of it. I said, that's what I was wondering, Lily. I said, that's what I've noticed in my work with people. People who are wise, they have found the symmetry in their life. They've found that duality. And because they have it, they appreciate themselves, family, friends, community, the world. They got it all. She said, well, yeah, that's kind of where I am. I said, thank you. That's what everyone's capable of, regardless of their past. That's what we can talk about at some point. Now, the last point about conflict I want you to remember is that, as I mentioned earlier, you have survived because you have had conflicts. You actually owe your conflicts to all that you've achieved in life, every one of them. And without conflict, you wouldn't be who you are today, doing what you do today, and having what you have today. That's actually the truth. It's not to deny the pain you've experienced. It's not to deny the suffering you've experienced. But it's also to realize that you've had an equal amount of benefit, growth, learning, that's allowed you to be here today, watch this video, and entertain these ideas, which means you've survived to be here today, which means you're a success. Regardless of what measure you want to use, you're a successful person. Now, when you take those ideas, those 7 ideas, our evolution requires conflict. Nature uses every conflict to create efficient learning, really. There's 2 forms, internal and external. And you can expect conflict constantly. And in a sense, your job is to understand each conflict each time and what you're supposed to learn from it, and to use that learning wisely, and to appreciate every conflict you get, taken those ideas about conflict. Aren't you lucky you have conflict? I perceive myself as very lucky. Because every conflict, there's something there for me to learn. Every challenge is a support. Taking that idea, go to today, look at what is your greatest challenge in your life today. It could be anything from the 7 years of life. It could be a spiritual challenge. You're working through your spirituality at this point in your life. It could be a mental challenge. Maybe it's a self-esteem issue or something. It could be a vocational challenge that you want a new job, a new career, a new destiny. It could be a financial challenge where you want to learn to manage your wealth more effectively. It could be a social challenge where you feel that you're isolated and alone and kind of alienated. It could be a family challenge where you're in conflict with some family member. It could be a physical challenge, like a health challenge, a disease, a handicap, anything. Take the one that kind of jumps out at you right now and ask yourself this question. Why me? Why now? What am I supposed to learn from this specific challenge that will enable me to grow as a person, enable me to appreciate myself in ways I haven't before because of this challenge? Because that's why it's there. And as I said, you're lucky to have it there. It doesn't matter what it is. I have the privilege in my work to have worked with most human traumas. Sexual traumas, financial traumas, family traumas, vocational traumas, mental traumas, spiritual traumas, you name them. And they have come through my door. And I've had the privilege of working with people who perceive these challenges. And I've had the privilege of watching everyone so far find the other side. And in so doing, move through it, move on with their life, and get on with the rest of their life. I can offer that to you. I guarantee my work. Now, take your challenge and ask yourself this question. What am I supposed to learn? That I have been maybe resisting, maybe ignoring, maybe just not noticing. But what am I supposed to learn? That if I learn it, it'll change how I perceive me for the rest of my life. It'll change how I perceive the people in my life and my future in general. Because that's why it's there. That's why it's there. So, what I'm suggesting to you is that what you may perceive is your greatest failure is actually your greatest success. And that you can't separate them. Take in these ideas, play with them, explore them, challenge them. If you have any questions, go on my blog, send me an email, I'll answer your questions. If you want to actually do some individual work, contact me. If you want to attend one of my seminars, there's a way you can sign up on the website. Explore my website, and if anything that you find interests you, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to work with you, because I can help you prove that you are perfect just the way you are. My name is Ken Pierce. Thank you for taking the time to view this video.